everyone. So I know it's been like 3 weeks since I've done my last Critical Hook video, and I apologize. It was just my birthday was on February 21st, so honestly I was just kind of taking February to myself. Brought in 27 fabulously, and now we're back to the good stuff. So I know I was going to do Toni Morrison for Black History Month. However, I realized that why not do it for Women's History Month, because Toni Morrison, of course, as you guys know, or maybe you don't know, is an African-American woman, and what a perfect time to include not only a woman, but a woman who is Black. Intersectionality is very important. I love Toni Morrison so much. If you haven't read any of her books, other books of hers are Beloved, The Bluest Eye, what was the other one? Sula, which is amazing. I still got to finish that one. Check her out because it's Black history or Black literature on a whole other level, and she incorporates magical realism and all that jazz. The book of today that we are going to be talking about very briefly is Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. For those of you who have read this book, I know you're probably wondering, why would I choose a book that centers around an African-American male? But, tricky, I found a way to delve into the women within this story and their relation to him, because I find that a lot of relationships between African-American men and African-American women are strained or tension-filled for many reasons that neither one of us truly know, or maybe we know, but communication is off. There are just so many reasons why our community may lack in understanding one another, but we're getting better, and I figured a video like this would be beautiful, especially for my Black women, because Toni Morrison is one of those authors who is great at not only self-identifying, but she's great at identifying others. Not saying that, you know, that's a good thing for another person to identify you, but no other author other than maybe Zora Neale Hurston, you know, as well, Alice Walker, too. No other author, in my personal opinion, has explained that dynamic between Black men and Black women and what we feel and where that may come from. So I thought this was a perfect opportunity to not only slightly touch on Black male issues and maybe why their thought process is the way that it is, why they may treat Black women the way that they do, all these things, and explain that to Black women and relate it to how we react as well. And you know, I'm rambling, but let's get right into it. I'm gonna try in my best way possible to condense the summary of what this book is about. So if you feel like I'm leaving out holes, I really apologize, but I can talk and find layers and everything, so let's just get to the chase. The book focuses on a Black man, African-American man, called or nicknamed Milkman. His real name is Macon Dead III, named after his father, who was also named after his father, who was a slave at one point. Basically, it just follows him from childhood to adulthood, and him on one hand trying to understand his upper class family, because he comes from a well-off family. His grandfather was the first Black doctor in the novel in Detroit on his street, and his father owns property and built up to that point, which is how he ended up being able to marry his mother. You know, back in the day, you didn't really marry for love, you married for assets. He's trying to understand his family and all the fucked upness that goes on with that, and his, you know, 2 older sisters, and as time goes on starts to realize his flaws and decides to take on a journey like mid to the end of the book, discovering his roots and all that and this jazz. You know, it's very, very good. I hope this summary didn't turn you away or turn you off from this, because the meat of this novel is amazing, and I wouldn't be talking about it if it weren't so. The first woman that I want to spend time talking about, who in my opinion is the most important woman in Milkman's life, even more important than his own mother, which hurts my feelings, but it makes sense in the long run. Her name is Pilate, and Pilate, I'll get into how she got her name. Pilate is Milkman's aunt. Now, Milkman's father, Macon, hates her. He hates Pilate, his aunt, slash his sister, his father's sister. But that wasn't always the case. Pilate and Milkman's father grew up together, and Macon, I can't talk. Macon essentially took care of Pilate after their father had passed away. And the way that their father had passed away was he accidentally, because he couldn't read as an ex-slave, he basically signed a paper which he didn't realize was him signing over his land, which was a lot at that time, and the land that he had was a lot. They had a lot of trees, a lot for a black man, especially an ex-slave. And the way he died was he stayed on his fence and was like, fuck that, when he realized that he had sold his property from getting help from someone else, and they had shot him. Clearly, these white men had shot this black man because they wanted his property. And from that day forward, Macon ends up taking care of Pilate, and they grow a very strong bond up until I think Pilate is 12 and Macon is about like 16 or whatever have you. But something happens after their father dies between the two of them when they're on their own journey trying to find a home, and that breaks their relationship. And just to let you know, Macon's the one that's petty in the situation, not Pilate. Pilate is actually a great woman, which is how Milkman begins to realize who he is and creates this entire story. Now, Pilate, the kind of woman that she is, she's very, like, if I were to give Pilate a zodiac sign, she would be an Aquarius for sure. She has other qualities that would make me see that, or make me think that she's another sign, but she would definitely be an Aquarius. And I say that because she's eccentric. She's this very beautiful woman who was born without a navel. I know, right? It's crazy. And there's a lot that goes into this book. That's why I'm trying to make this as short as possible, y'all. But yes, she has no belly button. It's, part of the whole magical realism that Toni likes to give us. And yeah, she's eccentric. She has no navel. She's really strong, especially after her journey when Macon decides to just leave her by the wayside, or I wouldn't say it like that, but when they separate, she's left to fend for herself on her own. And along the way, she gives birth to a daughter, and that daughter gives birth to a daughter, her granddaughter, and she is also an important character that we'll get into later. She also has like this little jewelry box attached to her ear that she forces the woman that took care of them for a short time after their parents had died, forces or gets this woman to poke a hole into her ear with the dangling box, and inside of the box is the only word that their father wrote, which was her name. And he wrote that name after she was given birth to, because during that birth, the mother, Singh, that's her name, had died. So with that being said, I'm going to go through some points that I believe make this relationship very powerful and help Milkman realize what kind of person he is. So the first thing is saving him. From the moment that Pilate, his aunt, realizes or finds out that Ruth, Milkman's mother, is pregnant by him, Macon, Milkman's father, is trying to get rid of the baby. He didn't plan on or accidentally got Ruth pregnant, and when Ruth found out that she was pregnant, she told him, and he was trying all these tactics to basically self-abort or get rid of her baby. And Ruth runs to Pilate and tells Pilate, help me, and Pilate saves him, pretty much. Milkman, saves her too, but saves the baby, like tells her to eat this, drink that, XYZ, and it's like, let me know if you need more or if you need extra protection, because she's trying to save this boy. So that's one of the first big moments that you realize her unconditional love for Milkman. The second point that I want to make with her is comfort. When Milkman is about like 12 years old, this is the first time in his entire life that he's meeting his aunt, Pilate. And he makes this trek on his own with a friend from the street. And it's crazy because Milkman doesn't live far from his aunt. He doesn't live far from all these people that I'm mentioning, clearly his mom and them. But Macon, Milkman's father, hates his sister so much that Milkman never in his life has saw the woman that had actually saved him from abortion. So when he's 12, he meets her for the first time. He goes into the home with his friend who had, brought him to his aunt's home, and they have like nothing. Remind you, Milkman comes from a place of wealth. He has lots of money, or he comes from a lot of money. But when he goes to Pilate's house, they don't have like really plush couches and nice chandelier and all this other unnecessary shit. All they have is what they need. But for some reason, in that instance, he realizes they're living better than me. Like, this is the first time in my life that I feel happy because this home is filled with so much love and comfort, and he just felt that. And then the last point that I made with Pilate was protection. She protects him in the end of this situation that happens where Milkman is about in his early 30s, and with that same friend, Guitar, that's the friend's name, Guitar, him and Guitar try to rob his aunt, Pilate, because his father was all up in his ear, making him believe that she had stolen something, and if you get this gold, that's what it was, gold, if you get this gold that I swore she took from me when she was 12 and I was 16, if you get this gold, like, we're gonna be worth so much more, blah, 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 blah. And Milkman, being a fucking asshole and an idiot, is like, yeah, lets his father rile him up, because in that instance you start to realize that his relationship with men, especially, and it's interesting, men that were really mean to him and treating him like shit, those relationships matter more to him because they said more, did more, give him roles of authority. So it's almost like he can't help but respect it and love it, because within hate there is love. When he robs Pilate, thinking that he's doing this grand thing, and she notices her home is pitch black when he's doing this, pitch black. And when they're trying to rob the gold, she's just chilling in the back. They can't see because it's pitch black. They can only like kind of see each other, but she's looking at them, stealing from her and not doing anything. Just like, why are they stealing that? Mind you, there's no gold in here, but I won't say what it is. And as soon as they end up getting in trouble by the cops, because they get pulled over, it wasn't even her that called the cops. They get pulled over in this nice car, and racism, why are you in a nice car? Because I actually have money. They get arrested and they see the bag and it's nothing but bones. So then they're just like, oh my God, like they're murderers. But Pilate, here she comes, scurrying over there to the police office, and she saves them. She puts on this whole poor black woman act. Mind you, she's a very strong woman. Like, she would never talk like this or act like this. But she demeans herself in that moment to save Milkman and gets them both out of jail. I mean, the father helps get them out of jail too. Milkman's father, Macon, even though he's disgusted by Pilate, he gives them money clearly, and does the whole yes, massa, and all that, and gets them out of jail. But the fact of the matter is, even when he disrespected the hell out of her in that moment, she still protected him, just like she had protected him before he was born. The second woman that matters a lot, or I think is very important in regards to Milkman realizing his relationships with black women, is his mother, Ruth. And like I said, she's second. Pilate is first. And there's a very strong reason for that. So Ruth, is this light-skinned black woman who obviously grew up well off because she was a daughter of the first black male doctor. But her mother had died, I think, when she was really young or during birth, something like that. And her father is pretty much the only man in her life that she knows, or only person she knows, genuinely cares for her. Like, actually gives a damn if she's alive or dead. Unfortunately, he passes away, and before he passes away, he marries her off to Macon, who clearly had his own interests, money-wise, and thought that with that money that he's marrying into can help him with his property money. Makes sense, but he also genuinely was attracted to her in a way and wanted, to marry her, I guess. That all changes when he realizes how much Ruth loves her father, which in a way is kind of uncomfortable, and it's the same way with her relationship with her son, Milkman. And there's a reason for it, and the reason for it is because of this void in herself. She desperately seeks caring and loving and affection because she doesn't really receive it a lot, especially black women and women in general who came from well-off families. A lot of the times they were trapped in their homes, or if they did go travel, it's not like they can do much because the main objective is for you to be a lady so that you can find a husband, you can find a man. And she did find a man. Macon married her, but after an incident that happened, or after, I guess, Macon caught her in the bedroom with her dead father, thinking that she was doing something sexual when apparently all she was doing was just kissing his dead hands because they were the only part of him that didn't look dead. You know, after that instance, he's just like, fuck her, like she's a disgrace. And quite honestly, thinking about it now, I think what really bothered him was the fact that she had more love for her father than him, and it was more of an ego thing. And of course he turns it into this whole, oh, she's not natural. But the way the book puts it, you hear both sides of the story. You hear the story from Macon telling Milkman, and you hear the story from Ruth telling it to Milkman. But I think I believe Ruth more, only because she doesn't actively try to bring Macon down. You know, Macon is very, I'm going to run to my son's room and let him know how awful his mom is, and that's why I slapped her the other day. Versus Ruth is just out here in certain instances playing victim, but it's kind of also her strength card, because she's like, I'm just going to sit here and do nothing and say nothing. And through that, the only time I guess it really benefits her is when she finally has a conversation with Milkman. He tracks her down after seeing her walk to her father's grave late at night, and it's like, where the hell is she going? Not knowing where she's going. And then he realizes that she makes this long trek, this crazy travel, to see her dead father, because he's still the only person that she thinks in that moment she cares about, and unfortunately he's dead. So she makes this long travel to talk to his grave, because that's better than going home to her husband who hasn't touched her in 20 plus years. You understand? Right. Which is actually the first point that I wanted to make with her, and why I think the relationship with her and Milkman is so influential and matters. So, conceiving him. The way that she ends up getting conceived with Milkman, because she has 2 daughters before Milkman. Milkman has 2 older sisters, Lena and Corinthians. After she gave birth to those 2 daughters, that's when the whole debacle with her father passing and Macon being like, oh my gosh, she's evil, that's when things had taken a turn. She goes to Pilate for the first time, like actually has a dialogue with her, goes to Pilate and is like, I really want to have a baby. And Pilate does this like witchcrafty type stuff, gives her like this something that's brewing, and she drinks it and eats this, that, and the third, or gives it to Macon. It was either her or Macon that has it, but that love potion essentially gets him to sleep with her, which is the last time in their entire 40 plus marriage they have sex. Can you imagine being in a marriage that long and your partner not touch you for that long, and you as a woman in that time not being able to go out and seek it without being called a whore? It's a whole mess. And that's how she gets pregnant. So that point was important to me, and I had to mention all of her pain and her entire story so that you can get a clear understanding as to why he was conceived that way. The second point that I have for Ruth is using him. So this is when things get a little incesty, a little weird. I know some of y'all watch Game of Thrones out there, so you can deal with a little black incest, I guess, which it's not really incest, but it is kind of inappropriate. So the second point, using him, Ruth breastfed Milkman for a minute, like breastfed him up until the point where he was like aware what time the breast milking was going to be done, blah blah blah. He had to be at least like 4 or 5, or maybe older, I don't know, nothing crazy, definitely not like double digit numbers, but he was being breastfed for a while. And there is one scene in which she's like desperate for affection, desperate for something, and that's like described in the book. It's described in the book as her favorite time of the day, right? I know, as I'm reading this I was like, what? But yeah, she's just breastfeeding him, but in that moment that is the only affection that she feels like she's getting. So that's why that's the best time of day for her. Unfortunately, the last time she breastfeeds him is, you know, the reason why it's the last time is because she's breastfeeding him at this big age, and one of the neighborhood people ends up seeing it through the window and was like, hey, what's going on here? She freaks out and drops him, and as Milkman gets older, he realizes or remembers that story and is like, what the fuck? But that's how he gets his nickname, because like I said, he's named after his father, Macon. He's Macon Jr. the Third, but they end up calling him Milkman, obviously because it makes it easier in the book, and because that's how he got it, from them seeing this young boy still being breastfed at an age that they wouldn't think that that's normal. Nobody's really the messed up individual. They just all have a lot of trauma stemming from, as you read the book, oppression and slavery and everything that people of color deal with, black people deal with. And the last point that I wanted to make about Ruth was overall caring for him / saving him again. So by the end of the novel, there is somebody that is after Milkman. Actually, there's a few people after Milkman, but the first person, which I don't want to say the person's name because that is the next person I'm going to discuss. Yes, it's a woman. Somebody is coming after Milkman to kill him. And Ruth, for the first time in her life, is like, not the first time. For the second time in her life, she's like, I'm going to take action. Just like she took action before and asked Pilate for help, she does the same thing. She's like, why is this woman trying to kill my son? And it's not just any old woman, it's and she decides to take action and saves him again, or at least saves a lot of heartache and learns a lot more about Pilate than she thought she could ever. And of course Pilate is with her. She's like, of course I'm gonna help you save your son, my nephew, even though the person that's trying to kill him is my granddaughter. Oh, blew you away, didn't I? Which leads me into our third woman, whom I think is very important in this novel. The last person, or the last woman that I'm going to talk about in regards to Milkman and the building up of his identity and relations with black women, is Hagar. That's her name. I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. Hagar. Hagar. I don't know. But Hagar, there's still a little bit more incesty things going on, is Milkman's cousin. Okay? AKA Pilate's granddaughter. Remember I said Pilate had a daughter who had a daughter? Yeah. Pilate's daughter Reba had a baby named Hagar. And she's a few years older than Milkman. Milkman's 12 when he sees her, and I think around this time she's like 15, 16, and the first thing he notices about her is her big, puffy, beautiful black hair. And that was the same day that he went to her home with guitar for the first time, Pilate's house for the first time. And within that comforting home, they also sing. All three women always sing, and Hagar, clearly joins in. Oh God, if this was made into a film, that scene alone would be so beautiful. But anyway, in that instance, when they're having discussions, Pilate and Reba are basically bragging about how Hagar never had to want for anything, because Pilate and Reba are different. They're cut from a different cloth than Hagar. Hagar's real prissy, this, that, and the third. Like, she's trying to live a real ritzy, glam life like Milkman has. But Pilate and Reba are the type to be happy with what they already have. When she's born, they end up spoiling her something crazy because, they love her unconditionally. And in that moment when they're talking, when he's a young boy, they're like, yeah, she's never starved, she's never did this, that, and the third, she's always been happy. And she says in that moment, she was like, I am hungry, or I have been starving. And they were like, what? They start freaking out. It gets dead quiet in the home, and they're like, when have you ever starved, baby? Or why did you never tell us that you were hungry? And then she's quiet, and then Pilate's quiet, just looking at her, and her mother's like tearing up. Reba is tearing up, looking at her like, you've been hungry and you never said anything to us? And Pilate's just like observing her, like grandmamas do. And then she cuts off Reba and is like, oh no, she not hungry for food. I forget exactly how it's phrased in the book, but in that moment you realize she's not hungry for food. She's hungry for love, and a different kind of love that she doesn't even understand, doesn't really exist, because love comes from within and comes from yourself. And she thinks that mirroring this world, this white world that society keeps throwing in her face, is what's going to bring her happiness. So that was the first point that I brought up. This is the first moment that Milkman sees her, and after she makes that comment and they get quiet, Pilate starts singing, and Milkman's looking at her from behind, and all of a sudden Hagar just starts singing. That's how I imagine it in my head, because from that angle, Milkman is sitting there, he sees Hagar, but he doesn't see her face, he just sees her from behind and all her hair, and all of a sudden it's like her head throws back and she just starts wailing away. And I would love to see a scene like that. It just sounds amazing. Second point that I wanted to make and why Hagar is important, this is going to be gross, but she takes his virginity. It's kind of like one of those days, one of those moments where she's like, I'm bored, and this young boy keeps coming here trying to flirt with me, this, that, and the third. Why not fuck him? Mind you, he's not 12, he's like 17, 18, and she's like in her early 20s, and yeah, she takes his virginity, and he's like, oh, I'm a new man, after chasing her for all this time because he had a crush on her for the longest. So in this instance, you realize his obsession with her, or the strong infatuation, which he doesn't realize is infatuation. To them, it's like, oh, this is love, or to her, it's love. To him, he thinks it's love, and then it starts to fall into infatuation, which I'm going to bring up right now, which is my third point, the breakup / the end. As Milkman gets older, he just kind of becomes more and more shitty, kind of resembling his father, which he doesn't even recognize, and everybody sees it but him and his best friend Guitar. As they're both getting older, you see Guitar more on the whole, I give a fuck about black issues, I care about us dying on the street, I care about this, that, and the third. But Milkman, he's been growing up privileged and has a completely distorted view of what's going on, even in his own community, which for the longest he can't even recognize he's a part of, because his father raises him to be like that. And by his early 30s, he decides that he's done with Hager. He's like, you know, I had my fun, and it was more fun when I was chasing her. I know it's been like hella years, but I'm just gonna end this. And he does it around the holidays, and he doesn't do it to her face. He mails her gift with the letter attached, basically being like, hey, this was fun, thanks a lot. And if that were I wish that were verbatim, but it's pretty much verbatim. He's like, thanks for the great times, and that's it. Not even a I love you, nothing passionate, not even in person, mind you. All of that just ends it. And that moment she snaps, like she loses her shit, which it just looks so similar, because this happens a lot, not just to women, to men too. That love loss. A lot of the times people lose their minds in those moments because it's the other person leaving. So it's kind of leaving you thinking like, well, what was wrong with me? Like, oh, where are you going? Like, before she didn't give a damn. She was just living her life, doing whatever. And for some reason, him just ending it, and not even just ending it like that, she loses her mind. And it's like, no, I want him. All of a sudden, this want becomes a lot stronger than what you thought it would be, or you would imagine it to be, considering her reaction to him in the beginning of the book and now the end. Long story short, she basically goes after him. She spends all this time trying to find him out in the streets looking crazy with like all different types of weapons, a knife one day, a hammer the other day, trying to kill Milkman, or basically kill him into being with her. It's really weird, but that's how I guess I would phrase it. And everybody notices. They're like, you know, she out here trying to kill you. Milkman's like, yeah, whatever. I know she's trying to kill me. I really don't give a damn, because he really doesn't care about much. He doesn't really know what to live for, and doesn't even understand the life that he lives. But yeah. And that was actually my fourth point with her, the cracking / death mission. So that was a death mission. She was out here trying to kill him, and then the last time that she tries to kill him is him chilling in Guitar's apartment, and he hears her, kind of almost sees her trying to pick through the window. She comes out, and I forget if it's like a knife or an axe, but he has like a book or something else there, and she slams it down once, and it slightly pierces his skin, like up above his neck. And he's just looking at her, and then she stops, because she's not gonna kill him. She still loves him, but she's trying to get a reaction. And he gets up, he calls her a cunt or something terrible, and it's all like, you feel bad about yourself now? And it's just real shitty, because he's choosing not to be understanding, realizing that she's losing her mind because of the way he ended things, not necessarily because of losing him. But Guitar understands that. I don't really want to get into that because it will make this video way too long, but Guitar pretty much takes care of her after Milkman just leaves her in the middle of his apartment, like shook and angry and severely depressed. And then the last point was her demise. She loses her mind so much, and it has less to do with Milkman as it has to do with black women and the way that we feel about ourselves in a society that's always trying to make us feel as though we're not enough unless we're white. You know, that burden of attraction, or people being attracted to black people, I feel like is predominantly placed on black women. You know, beauty is supposed to be everything for women. It's supposed to be the gateway to marriage and the gateway to money and all these other things. So we're all striving to be something that we're not, because we think that we're ugly when we're not. And that's pretty much what happens in the book. You see her going around scrambling. You see Pilate and them trying to give her money, trying to make her feel better about herself. And she goes and gets all this makeup and clothing and realizes, like, he doesn't want me, but she tells herself he wants a light-skinned woman with penny-colored hair, and it's such a powerful part of the book, and I really wish that I markered it so I could read it real quick, but I'm trying to make this video as short as I can, y'all. Y'all know I can talk. So yeah, those were the 3 women that are very powerful when it comes to Milkman. And now the last thing that I'm going to discuss is how this all ties together and what I have recognized between the relationship between black men and black women.